Right. Do we want to make a start, guys? I'll just kind of present what we're going to be talking about today. So thanks again for everyone who has joined us and everyone who's going to kind of join us in the next couple of minutes. Welcome. We are joined by one of our very valued customers today, the Modern Milkman, particularly John, who is the CIO there, and our very own Matt, CDO at Kleene, and former Chief Data Officer at Trainline and Just Eat. Today, we're going to be talking about scaling a D2C business to 200K customers through data, and specifically the journey that the Modern Milkmen have been on. As one of our customers, we've had the joy and pleasure to hear their stories. So I'm really, really excited that John has given you guys all the same opportunity today, and just really excited to kind of learn even more about their journey, why they kind of chose to work with Kleene as well, and just talk about their kind of growth from here on out. So just wanted to send you guys a reminder, please do get your questions and comments trickling in the Q&A throughout, and then we'll definitely get some time towards the end to address those questions. Really, we're going to let John kind of take it away. Matt is going to be kind of interjecting here and there, and then questions at the end. So please keep them coming throughout. So John, please do the honours and take it away.
Yeah, hi. I'm John Hughes, CIO at the Modern Milkman. I started with the Modern Milkman towards the end of 2018, I want to say. I'd met a big burly farmer guy in 2018 at another company, and he was the first person in that company to talk an awful lot of sense. And I asked him what he was up to, because he clearly knew what he was doing. And he started talking started talking to me about how he just bought a milk round in Burnley. Now that hardly feels like it's the genesis of a big business, you know. But the more I started to talk about it, the more I listened to him, the more I realised that I had a complementary set of skills for him. And I was like, from my perspective, I'd always wanted to build a business data first. I'd worked in investment banking where I would be privy to a Bloomberg terminal and I could basically mine into any data that I wanted. And then I'd moved into startups and I had basically had to self-serve, and I'd had to learn to self-serve. And I understood I started to understand all the collection points that you have within a website and within a company as well. So I'd started consulting and working with big companies with data, and I just got really, really frustrated. If you're a good analyst, and I sometimes class myself as a good analyst, there will come a time where you know about a subject more than the owners or the people who run the business. And Matt, I'm sure you'd agree with that.
Absolutely.
You may not class yourself as a good analyst, though. So
I used to be a good analyst.
Yeah,
a bit less. Actually, no, getting more hands on these days. But yeah, completely resonate with that. Just yeah, the data is the truth, right? And you have your hands on the data, you end up really knowing the business inside out with the empirical facts.
You can do, and I found it disheartening when people would take my data and then not do anything with it. I remember one time actually identifying like a $5 billion sales channel with a car group, and just nothing getting done about it, because that wasn't why I was there. So I'd gone away and I was like, look, there's so much you can automate. There's so much you can. Clearly, you've got my brilliant analyst in there, so I thought a lot of myself at that time. But yeah. So I was incredibly frustrated, and this whole principle of data first was really important to me. And Simon was someone who was very receptive to that. He understood that his skills weren't in data. I say that they weren't in data, but actually Simon's pretty sharp, you know, with his numbers and everything like that. But what he was quite happy to do was to defer to me when it came to things. So I started looking at his business, and if you could move on one slide. Yeah, that's what I inherited. So essentially, he was running his business off Google Sheets. You know, not only was it off Google Sheets, but everything was colored, and I absolutely cannot stand colors in spreadsheets. And anybody on this call who does enjoy spreadsheets, you should probably colors on spreadsheets, you should probably leave now. This isn't for you. But if you don't, you know, we see this every day. People are building data sets on spreadsheets all the time because it's quite easy. But I basically took this away, and I looked at it, and I looked at it again. And by this point, they had about 600 customers. So quite how they were managing this, they had a sheet for every round, and obviously every round was just a template of this. So where they ran a Monday, Wednesday, Friday round, all the Tuesdays got grayed out, etc. But I went through, and one of the first things I did was I templated it and I turned it into a data set. And I turned around to Simon and I was like, you've got customers coming in, they're spending £6 a week. 20% of them you lose within 4 weeks, but the rest seem to stick around. You know, that seems to be the hurdle point. You get them to 4 weeks, they'll be with you for a long time. I said, how much are you paying to get these customers in? He's like, he didn't really know that. He had an idea based on what they were spending on Facebook, but they were only doing last click attribution, etc. So we got there and we felt, well, actually, yeah, there's possibly a business. We did some tests with some marketing channels, some door-to-door channels, which alleviated our operational issues. And we were like, yeah, we can really grow this. So it got to about April 2019, and Simon released the app. And I say Simon because I had nothing to do with the app. So when the app lands, I think if you just move on, when the app lands, it's a total it was a total nightmare. It was a catalog app that had been scrunched together to give some sort of subscription flexibility. We couldn't see forward orders. We had no real idea how to serve drivers and how much volume each driver was doing. And all of the transactions, deliveries, and payments were handled in the same table. And it was so bad. So we raised some money in June 2019 because we've got a bit of commercial traction. By this time, I think we might have like 3,000 or 4,000 customers. And we took more than 10% of that and we spent it on restructuring the data, which at that point in time, with an ugly website, it was very ugly, and some clunky apps, it was a pretty brave decision to spend something that wasn't going to improve any metrics. It wasn't going to increase average order value. It wasn't going to reduce CPA. It wasn't going to increase LTV. It wasn't going to do any of that. It was just going to keep the show on the road. And, you know, full credit to the guys that had invested in us at that point, that they trusted me on those things. Full credit to Simon as well for being as crazy as I am in understanding that. But for us to build a business that, you know, was going to last, we needed to underwrite all of that, and we couldn't have underwritten it with the existing system.
What was the route to persuading them of that? Because that's such a common thing, right? Investing in data, you're a step at least removed from the actual value, as you say. So did you get pushback on that from the investors, from Simon, or how did that play out?
I never got any pushback from Simon because, like, and this is one of the important things that we get to. Analysts as a whole and data as a function doesn't normally permeate the C-suite. Yeah, I was quite fortunate that in forming the company, I was already there. Yes, I could have great influence over, like a greater influence over these things. And you know, some people take data as kind of like a homework marking exercise. So it's like, oh, I think we're doing really good. The data says we are great. You know, that isn't how you should be using data. That you should be using data to evolve your business. You know, and I think in the 6 months that I'd been with the firm in that time, I think I'd proven that my method worked. And so when I turned around and said, look, we need to be able to do this, to do this, to do this, they trusted me because I had six months of back history with it. You know, I'd kind of gone and built everything that they'd had so far for free using Google App Scripts and various techniques that that many of you will have no doubt encountered. The only issue that I had with the APIs that we took on was they took 9 months to build. And you'll see Danger Mouse there, but the CTO is Penfold, and James won't thank me for saying that, but I had to get it in there somehow. But before we could finish this, we were in a national lockdown, and we had it almost became unmanageable. I never thought we would get to the level of customers we got to with with the previous infrastructure. I mean, we scaled our servers about 4 times in the space of a week. You know, we would just throw in CPU at the problem to get us through it. But we were also, running a lot of offline transactions as well. Not transactions, but we were running a lot of offline processes to keep the show on the road, to make sure that the routes were balanced and that we could move everything around, etc. And you know, in terms of data strategy, I'd always had a vision, but in March 2020, we are 18 months ahead of where we expected to be in terms of customer acquisition. We were profitable at this point. And, you know, we had one analyst, which was me, and I kind of had a few other hats to wear. So it comes to this point, I started to look at ways to simplify my job. And do some of the things that I wanted. And unfortunately, I made the wrong choice at that point. And I went down the road of getting in a consultant to build me a load of dashboards. And, you know, there may be people in the audience that are in a similar position now, and they're thinking visualization is the answer. If you're a well-established business, it might well be the answer. And I would never, you know, every individual circumstance is thingy. But what I found with those dashboards is within 2 or 3 months of them coming out, they were almost redundant, and to the point where within 6 months, no one even looked at them, you know. So there, you know, if your metrics are solid and, you know, you're not experiencing crazy growth, etc., you know, and you're in a steady state, then perhaps that is a thing. But I will readily admit to whoever's willing to listen that we made a mistake. I made a mistake. You know, Matt, I'd be quite happy to share your thoughts, hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think a lot of people find themselves in this position where the absence of data is felt in the absence of visual representations of the data, and that, because it's like the front end, right? It's the thing that you actually interface with. So yeah, you want to fix that, which means you end up kind of missing the middle bit, missing the bit that we're going to come on and talk about, which is really the engine that fuels, among other things, dashboards. So you're building one kind of end state of data, but you're missing out all the other bits, and you've done a kind of point-to-point build to get to that and closed a bunch of doors on the way. And I really do mean, like, technically you close doors. You're aggregating data, you're building visualizations on top of that aggregated data, and you can't get back to the kind of the disaggregated, flexible, denormalized sets that you really need to end up building the analysis on top of. So you're kind of chopping yourself off at the knee in terms of analysis by doing that. But it's a very natural impulse to try and plug that gap, which is so visible in the business. So yeah, that it resonates really strongly. And I think my
dashboards guru is on this. He knows how often these dashboards are evolving. You know how the guy feels my pain. I think I've made him change the data sources in Tableau about 3 different times. So he's off on holiday tomorrow, so I won't.
Well earned.
Definitely, yeah. But with that, the reason for those changes is because in a scale up like ours, the metrics are changing. You know, as soon as a metric becomes understood and, you know, everyone is looked to it, it's always the derivative questions that they're asking. And so we got to a point where I was calculating, so I used to calculate churn on a static week by week basis. And I used to say that the churn for existing customers was X and the churn for customers in their nursery period was Y. Yeah. But that began to be more and more meaningless because we had more customers, and basically, you know, a 0.1% deviation in the existing churn meant far more than a 2 percentage point movement in the nursery churn. So we wanted a different way to look at it. You know, so churn, which had it steered the business for 18 months at that point, it became redundant, you know, and in much the same way that we have just dropped using average order value because it's becoming redundant, because we're much more interested in the profitability of a drop. So the average drop value. Now, the order value was the amalgamation of all the drops in the week, you know, whereas, you know, the drop value is the instance. So again, going back to what you said about aggregation, if we'd have aggregated everything to the customer's weekly level, we would never see that. No. CPA as well becomes very interesting. You know, especially like you want to be able to see your CPA by channel, but effectively, you don't. What you want to see is you want to see your return on your CPA, you know, and that leads us to cohorts. And it was around about June, July of last year, we were looking at raising our Series A, and everyone's like, "Can we see your cohorts? Can we see your cohorts? Can we see your cohorts?" And I was like, yeah, you can, but the process to get the cohorts was like 5 different views on top of each other. And it took about an hour to run because everything was still in a SQL server. And it basically meant that we probably put some people off because we were giving them cohort data that was like a month old. And they were like, maybe they just thought, why, is there something they're not, probably now looking back, they were, you know, but you know, I wanted a way to be able to compute that, but even now, just a regular cohort stack isn't going to be enough anymore, because where we're going now is, okay, well, I built this from the ground up, so my cohorts are done at the customer level because I don't want to aggregate it, so it's completely disaggregated to the customer. It's even potential. We've got the potential to do it by drop rather than to do it on the weekly cohort. And where we'll go with that is we will look at subsets of the cohort. So we'll look at customer behaviors, define customer behaviors through another channel, and then be able to put them into cohorts and say, right, if a customer has an issue within the first 4 weeks, what does their LTV look like versus the universe, you know, and be able to make investments in customers that have that issue in order to prolong their life, shall we say?
Yes, yeah. It's a great point you're making about the how easy it is to put an investor off. And who knows what the reason ultimately is, but if you can't get hold of that data quickly and simply, and in a data that is fresh, and that all kind of goes hand in hand. If you don't have the technology and the ability to access your own data in a quick and timely manner, it's off-putting for investors, and it's just a massive time sink if you're having to create stuff directly to answer investors' questions rather than going cohorts. Of course, you can have cohorts because we look at it all the time. It's how we run the business. So we're not building stuff specific for that investment question. Again, it's because of the sort of client base that we work with at Kleene. This is a thing that comes up a lot where we're working with these startup and scale up businesses on that journey from C to A to D2C rounds. And so often this is front and center the outcome that they want from a data platform. They've just been through that pain and had that embarrassment. If anyone on the call hasn't listened to At the Top by Nathan Latka podcast, it's pretty eye-opening when he has people on that podcast who don't know the answers to their basic metrics. It's if you can bear the cringe, it's well worth a listen. But yes, having those metrics just down and being able to answer them quickly and efficiently is absolutely critical for that kind of journey.
But you also shouldn't feel embarrassed by it, because like it's representative of how many people you've got in your business at the time, because you can't do everything. Computing your cohorts, like, whilst it's kind of fundamental in what I'm doing at the minute, there's a lot more firepower behind me now. And speaking of firepower, as we were coming through our Series A, and it looked like it was going to be successful, I started to plan what data at the Modern Milkman was going to look like in the future. And I was adamant that we needed something bespoke, like something that would change a lot. So we needed interoperability, and that's when I met with you guys, and I looked at what you guys were doing. I'd considered hiring a data engineer to do it all for me, and I kind of like doing it myself as well. There's nothing better than winning over an API, like the Facebook API or something like that. There's nothing better than managing to sort BigQuery out. It's really, really satisfying, but also it's diminishing returns. It's like you're not saving money, you're spending time. And you must view it like that as well. And when I saw, when Greg showed me the connectors you guys already had built, and then I saw Snowflake on top of it, and Snowflake, I realized that it wasn't going to take me an hour to run a cohort. It was going to take me 5 seconds. And not just that, but the next time I'm talking to a VC, I'm gonna say, have you got a Snowflake share? And if they've got a Snowflake account, I'll just share my cohorts into them, and they can just have it. And that says as much about our data literacy as it does anything else. And I've got a funny story on that, but unfortunately I can't tell you it all. Because basically we got our money in, we signed a contract with you guys in January, and we got up and running. But it's quite, you don't want to do too much too soon. But within about 4 days, I was building cohorts in Snowflake, and you guys were like, what are you doing? We're not ready for this. And I was like, I know you aren't ready, but I've got people that want to see these, So I immediately rebuilt the tables that were taking an hour in SQL, and I was sharing them out. And in the next week or so, we should see the fruits of what I was doing. So, but I will explain that to you at another point. But yeah, so with the Series A, I want to evolve data all the time. Yeah. Our CFO, Lambro, is very ambitious. He wants to be able to predict revenue within $1, basically. And in order to do that, he needs to leverage more of the data. He needs to understand what the seasonality impacts. And we're both fairly curious. We want to understand lots of things. So when we look in order to satisfy Lambro, and in order to satisfy my own curiosity, we went for a stack that is very much clean into Snowflake. Yeah, we use I think we use Azure as well. No, sorry, I don't think. I know we use Azure. Sorry, I shouldn't.
You do.
Yeah. So that was ours. Azure. We lent on Azure because of our own tech stack and our own developer preferences as well. But we have about 8 or 9 different connectors. We're constantly asking for more. And you guys are providing it, but some of the things that, some of the questions that we've ticked off. So I've got like 3 things. The value of different channels, you know, we're already doing that. I would demo it, but I don't feel comfortable presenting on this. So the true cost of customer contact is something that I alluded to earlier. It's looking like, you know, we're managing to pull all our customer contact data into one place, and we're able to quite easily join that up with our transaction data, or our lack of transaction data. It's more pertinent. There's some predictive modeling that's already started. So we've used all of our web data, and we moved to GA4 when we brought Gandalf in, and we moved to GA4, and we also we use AppsFlyer as well, which is another great system. And they help us identify customers, and not just customers, but their behavior on the website. So running into the pre-transaction bit, so you can understand, so that eventually you'll be able to understand where your pain points are on the website, or where your pain points are on the app. That is very much like in its infancy at the minute, but we do want to get to the point where our product managers are able to download, like take that data off and analyze it themselves, because we have a mantra at the Milkman, which is everybody is an analyst. You know, everybody should want to be an analyst, and I really believe in democratizing data. I've worked in companies before, as you will have, Matt, whereby there are data silos, and I can't have this data because it lives in another department. And Matt, jump in here and
that massively resonates. I've spent a lot of my career trying to get that data democratization thing right, because I think it's easy to get the wrong end of the stick and think that it's it's all data for all people, or it's people have views of of exactly what it is, and I think the way to execute it well is what's on screen here. Utilizing modern tooling like Snowflake and of course Kleene to get the data in there, but then building out the models. I think of kind of walled gardens, if you like, that give you the set of data that pertains to the area of the business that you're really focused on, and empowers you to answer those questions and analyze the thing that you're thinking about. So if you're there as that product manager, you can really see that end-to-end customer journey, and you're no longer thinking about things as siloed in different data sources. You're no longer thinking about this is Google Analytics data, or this is my transactional data, this is Facebook data. You're just thinking about these are customer touch points. This is part of that customer journey and part of that customer experience with my brand. And that all really matters for how we talk to them, how we optimize their experience, how we re-engage them, how we move them up the value chain. That's where it becomes really powerful, where you don't even care what the source of data is. It's just information that gives you a step towards the answer to the question you're thinking about.
Yeah, and it's leveraging your big bets as well. So I can talk. Going back to June last year, we'd got the API in, and we'd started to anecdotally experience some success with leaflets. So what we did is we looked at the leaflet channel, and we were like, how are we going to track this? It's very hard to do, but it worked for us in that we built a model that basically went and checked every hour if somebody had signed up in a sector. And we just got that to do it. We got that check made every hour for a couple of weeks before, so that we could see the incremental uplift when leaflets went out. So it helped us enormously, because it gave us another tool to go into the market with. And if you went into our database, you would see the timestamps of every of these incremental checks. But I didn't know any other way to build it. So onto our data vision, and we can talk about raw ingredients, like literally anyone, as we've seen with the Bake Off over the last 10-15 years. Anyone can bake a cake if you give them the raw ingredients. I'm not saying, when I say everybody's an analyst, I don't mean that all opinions are equal. But what I do mean is if you can put the right information in the hands of a person doing a job, you can improve that person, because they not only do they have their walled garden knowledge, but they're able to say, oh, this is like, my hypothesis is true, or my hypothesis is false. Think, for instance, a customer service manager, so a person managing a team is probably, they will build up personal relationships, and they'll be able to say, oh, I think this person's good. It may well be anecdotal, but you give them the data to see all of their stats for customer service. If they're held to if you hold their toes to the fire on how many tickets they close down per hour, they start to see a different picture. So they start to see, well, or maybe that guy that I don't like is actually really good, and there he is at 12 CPH or something. So that's the way I want to see data. But also, I love the customer service value around it. Like, your failure points are in customer service. So those guys see it a lot. Those guys see it more than anyone, And if they're able to say, well, okay, this is happening a lot in leads, for instance, they're able to get information back to the business and back to people who will buy into it really quickly. And that's very, very valuable to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, Modern Milkman and Kleene, very different businesses in many ways, but so much of what you're saying resonates for me as a founder of a rapidly scaling business as well. You're completely right that ultimately the interface between the product and your customers, whether you're selling software or milk rounds or widgets or whatever it is you're doing, or services, that interface is where you win or lose. So actually having the metrics around that to test that intuition and test that, there's so much. I mean, Emily and I are interfacing with our clients all the time, and we're both, if you look at it positively, high EQ. If you look at it negatively, emotional roller coasters. Like, day in, day out, we're kind of on the front line of that. And obviously you bring a lot of emotion to that. So to be able to take the emotion out of it and really measure, where are we winning, where are we losing, resonates incredibly strongly. And it really is where you develop your product vision. You have an idea of where you want to take the product, but that data really tells you where you need to take the product. I couldn't agree more. Awesome.
Stop sharing now, guys, and then just kind of address some of the questions. So we've got a couple of questions coming in, which was brilliant. So first question from Anonymous. I think this is for you, John, just looping back to your kind of metrics around cohort analysis. Wouldn't you look at churn on a cohort basis, so monthly, as example, if you do deliveries weekly?
You would, yeah, but you also have the potential to miss 11 of 12 deliveries before you realize anything's gone wrong. So the duration of your cycles becomes quite important as well. We've tried looking at monthly before, and it's quite it doesn't quite work for us, because even within a week, there are three opportunities to drop off. So that's where monthlies don't necessarily work for us.
Yeah,
and I think that's it's what you evolved to, where you're looking at churn. Is that evolution that you described there, John, where you started off looking at churn as just a metric in and of itself, then you started looking at that by cohorts, and then of course the granularity of that cohort is determined by the nature of the business that you're in, but also where you are. It might be that you develop products that mean that monthly cohort analysis is the thing to look at, but having that flexibility, having the transactional level data and that single view of your customer, means that actually you aggregate at the weekly level, and then you want to re-aggregate at the monthly level. It's fine, because you've got the transactions there in and of themselves, so you have that full flexibility, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we actually do it at the daily level rather than at the weekly. Nice. Because it just becomes messy for us for accounting periods, you know. I mean, I'm a big advocate of a 13-month year, but I never seem to be able to get my way with that, because that makes everything quite easy, but no one ever knows which period they're in then. So what we decided was to aggregate at the daily level, and then, you know, the months are the months effectively, which means that we do have issues with seasonally budgeting. So we've got to adjust for the number. We have periods within our week that are busier than certain other periods. I'm sure you could guess them, but I'm not going to say it. But yeah, essentially, if we have 5 of a certain day in a month, it's really good. If we have, you know, so when the 31st is, I don't know, whichever day you suspect, then that can be really good for us, you know. And all of a sudden you're 10% over where you forecast, and you're like, oh, why is that? And it's because of the way we've got things set up. So.
Yeah, that seasonality must have a huge impact, exactly as you say. And Lambo wanted to get down to that kind of that kind of granularity. It's phenomenal. Nice.
Cheers for that, John. And we've got a great question from Echo. Which other platforms did you consider alongside Kleene? So obviously you kind of went for the consultancy, but were there any other kind of tools that you looked at, and what made you go for Kleene in the end?
Yeah, so there's all the tools that will basically, you know, is it Fivetran, Stitch, and I'd used them all, and they weren't going to save me any time. I feel like I would have then spent my life like just patching over them, like literally, you know, I didn't see a way for me to get out of there. I was looking for a bridge between me having to hire a data engineer and, you know, so I needed something that would act as my data engineer for now. When you guys were clearly that. The other ones would have just been, essentially I'd already kind of built things in app scripts that were doing the same job, but I couldn't sustain, like if something fell apart, I couldn't sustain that, you know, and I didn't have enough specialism within the business. So I found you guys, and it was a bit of a godsend. I was like, that's exactly what I'm looking for, you know. I didn't know it now. I actually think that you guys probably undersold yourselves at the start as well. You know, like the service has been excellent. So, you know, like if anyone's sitting on the call thinking, oh, shouldn't I? You know, yeah, you absolutely should. And if you do sign up and you want to talk to me about how much you can leverage your own data, I'm more than willing to go through that journey with you if you want.
That's awesome to hear. Thanks, John. Massively appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I think the comparison, like the way we think about the tools you mentioned there, Fivetran and Stitch, and yeah, they are excellent. They really, and they've influenced what we've built quite significantly. But you're right, they are ultimately, it's tooling for an engineer to operate with, to shortcut some of those steps.
And the way, like, it's like, you know, it's cheaper from one point, i.e. you like the monthly bill that you see, but that time spent thing again, that is so valuable, especially if you're like me and like, yes, you want to be in data all the time, and you can be in data, but you've got to do other things. You know, you can't expect to, you can't free yourself up, and I need to free myself up to do other things. Like, you know, we couldn't have developed our metrics or our cohorts or got Snowflake shares to VCs if I was spending all my time in Fivetran.
Yeah,
it just wouldn't be possible.
That's it. It sometimes makes me a little bit sad to think that I've dedicated my every waking moment to building some unsexy plumbing, but that is really what it is. It's the plumbing to get you to the place where you are in the position to add value, rather than faffing around with configs and setups and moving data from one place to another through pipes that you're maintaining. That's really what it's all about. And I think that's the way it's the way the market is going, where that realization of the ability to unlock value from data is it's becoming almost table stakes now. Like if you're not doing it, it's it's a black mark rather than a plus if you are doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to this point as well, we've had an observation from Renata. I think we've got to be cognizant that there's not always going to be data professionals on these kind of webinars who really understand the world that
they must have just been pretty bored for 40 minutes then, the poor guys, sorry.
The paradigm we're in. So just to bring it back to kind of the commercial side and what this stuff really means. So really great question from Renata here. Just a quick kind of elevator explanation of the stack. So Kleene, Snowflake, BigQuery. If we could just talk to each one of those, but for those of our audience who aren't overly familiar in the data space, that'd be really helpful, guys.
Yeah, I can take that on. So I'll do them in a random order. Let's go. So Snowflake first off. It's really kind of best in class cloud-based data warehouse. That's what Snowflake is. So you whether you are on Microsoft Azure or Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud Platform, you can utilize Snowflake, which is software as a service, deploy into that whatever environment you want, and it then becomes the single source for all your data, into which you put all your data. But if you go out and buy Snowflake, as I say, you're buying best in class. It has some incredible functionality. It is completely plug and play. You don't have to have a DBA looking after it day in, day out. It handles all of that stuff for you. But you're still left with some challenges of how do I get data loaded into it? How do I then coordinate all the things that I want to do to that data once it's in Snowflake? And that's where Kleene comes in. Those are the two bits that we do. I won't linger on that any longer, but it's loading the data and then it's transforming the data in Snowflake. So applying all of your logic to it. And then BigQuery is really Google's own, probably the simplest way of thinking about it is it's Google's own data warehouse technology in their own platform. So it's proprietary to Google. But the way John and the guys, Gandalf, getting an honourable mention there, we'll leave his real name unspoken. But the guy behind the Google Analytics and the kind of marketing side, the marketing data side of things, utilizing BigQuery to surface and collect all of that marketing data into one place before piping it over to Snowflake to then be connected with all the other bits of data, so the transactions and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. I call that our pre-transaction layer, essentially.
Yeah.
It's everything before we know the customers.
Nice.
Yeah, there was another question from Renata before that as well, wasn't there? So, which was, can we spell out the acronyms? I don't know which acronym she'd like us to spell out, but
yeah, call anything out for sure. Just let us know if we've spouted some jargon, and we can do a quick translate.
Yeah. Renata says, VP of marketing here, live in data studio and analytics, but data is everywhere, from QuickBooks to Shopify to Google.
So what I would say to that then, what I think that this problem would solve is that if she thought about all the time that she spent in compiling that data together and getting it into Data Studio, etc., how many hours would she save a week? How many hours would she save a month? And also from a growth point of view, if you had to grow your transaction volume by 2 or 3x, is it feasible that you can still continue to do that and be the VP of marketing? Because I'd suggest it probably isn't. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, I think the ability to pull Shopify, QuickBooks, Google, Stripe, all of that stuff into one place and then apply the logic to it, do it once, do it well, and then automate that stuff. It just frees up so much of your time. And when things are being done in a a more manual way, and you're having to drag formulas down in Google Sheets and export it out to Data Studio and that sort of thing. It's so fraught with the risk of human error, and it's it can be the risk as well as the time burnt on that. And I love that phrase, John. You're not saving money, you're spending time. That's lovely way of putting it. I think that's really the way to think about this.
Yeah, definitely. Hope that answered the question, Renata, but do feel free to follow up with us afterwards, and we can kind of answer any other questions you have. We've had another question in from Anonymous. What were the biggest challenges you had, John, making the transition from kind of being almost owning this data piece for the Modern Milkman, and then almost handing it over to someone else to take care of a big part of it for you? What was that transition like? What challenges did you face in that process?
Well, I'd already done that anyway by hiring analysts in anyway. So and they'd proven themselves more than capable of looking after certain aspects of it. So you may think, like, I suppose that our relationship with you goes outside of the walls a bit. So but there are the legal agreements are fairly watertight. I can't really see anyone getting upset about that. Hosting things in Snowflake, well, if you can't host it in Snowflake, you can't host it anywhere, because you could host it on premise, and like somebody from Middlesbrough could burgle your thingy and steal all your servers, and then they've got access to all your data. Sorry to anyone else that's from Middlesbrough, but or Sunderland even. But yeah, so like Snowflake is a multi-billion-dollar company. Its reputation hinges on data security, and you guys want to be that, so your reputation will hinge on your data security. If you can't do those basics, then you're not going to, like, if anyone even gets hung up on that point, they're asking the wrong question effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting. The security side of things, it makes total sense that people are sensitive about it, and it's so important to get it right. But yes, this is, as I said before, this is best in class cloud-based technology, and ultimately, this data is all. If you're comfortable paying for things over the internet, then it's the same thing. Get it right, do due diligence, but this is the modern way.
Yeah, just to elaborate on something that I missed out as well, because someone asked about like working with you guys. One of the main, one of the things that I always look for in my analysts is kind of a scrappiness. It's not, they don't have to be the intellectual superpowers. They need to be scrappy. They need to be able to take a piece of data and know what it's like to sit there for 3 hours and get absolutely no sense out of it. Because being an analyst can be a lonely thing at times. We call it going down the rabbit hole. And Alex Goodwin is brilliant at going down a rabbit hole. And I check in on him every now and then and just pull him out of his rabbit hole sometimes. But what we saw with you guys was something not dissimilar. It's that, like, you as a company are growing, and our success with this platform was kind of intertwined with your own. And I knew that you would go that extra mile. You had that scrappiness as well, which we all need in a startup.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as I said earlier on, a lot of our clients are in a very similar always scrappy, kind of rapidly scaling state as we are. So that kind of camaraderie, apart from anything else, just we feel your pain and we live your pain, and yeah, we really do. Live and die by again what I said earlier, live and die by the interface with our customers. So it's so important for us to provide that support and go the extra mile, disappear down rabbit holes with you from time to time, and hopefully find the way back out together, right?
Oh, Daniel.
Yeah, poor Daniel. Daniel is our analyst, by the way, working with Modern Milkman. So yeah, just for clarity on that.
With us today, so shout out to Daniel for all the amazing work you've been doing.
Ah, yes, there you are, Dan.
So I guess just John, a question from me, just out of interest. Was data kind of always a priority? It wasn't a hard sell for you to sell into the Modern Milkman, or did you really have to kind of drive it as a priority yourself, or did you feel that was always the feeling throughout the business?
No, that's what's unique about this, you know, and yes, we've had headwinds from COVID and tailwinds. I always say headwinds. You know, we've had a tailwind from COVID, but if we weren't on top of our data at that point and willing to reinvest in that, then we wouldn't have been able to place the larger bets that we have done, you know, and we wouldn't have been able to get through like a seed round and a Series A, you know. So data has always been a big part of it. People are so receptive to it as well, and I hope that like that continues as a function for other businesses. I'd quite like to shine a big massive light saying we are a data company, but what determines what is a data company? You know, Snowflake's a data company. You guys are a data company. We are a data-driven company. You know, we will try and make as many bets as we can based on the data that we have, and we will always look to move forward with that as well.
Mm. Yeah, I think you look at companies who do data really well, and you know, you start at the biggest companies in the world, and this is why they're the biggest companies in the world. You look at Facebook, you look at Google, and they don't have, you know, knowing a reasonable amount about how Facebook structure themselves. For example, there isn't a chief data officer at Facebook. It's just endemic and required at every level that people understand the value of data and understand how to do it well. You simply cannot get a job at Facebook unless you demonstrate those kind of credentials, and I'm sure it's very similar at Google and the like. So I think a lot of businesses have a lot of catching up to do to get to that state. Obviously, I'm talking myself out of a career here in that I've spent a career getting to chief data officer positions, but I really don't think that CDO will be a title in 20 years' time. It's just it'll be an expected thing. And to your point, right at the top of the call, John, data doesn't often penetrate the C-suite, and it needs to, and it should. And the sooner that happens, and you don't have to hire somebody in who gets data, but instead it just exists from the CEO to CFO and CMO, etc. The better those businesses become. So yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, you've got a warm sales lead in the questions as well, because to Renata's question, they do all of that out of the box. So just pick up the phone. Yeah, you could in theory, Renata, like to get your Shopify, your Stripe, your MailChimp, and your Google Analytics and QuickBooks, they could have that done by next week. So just take the plunge and imagine how much time you'll save and cost that out.
Yeah. Awesome, John. If this Modern Milkman gig doesn't work out for you,
we've got a place with us forever.
Well, the data suggests that it might, though. So
it's looking that way. It's looking that way.
Yeah, we've got a fairly stacked deck in terms of data. So yeah, but that's cool. Right, I've got 2 kids that I need to go and look after, unfortunately. So.
Right. Thank you so much, John. That was just really, really interesting, and thank you for sharing your story, and we look forward to seeing you guys go from strength to strength. And thanks again, Matt, for your contribution there, and thanks to everyone who's joined us this evening. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you have any questions for either of us, John at the Modern Milkman, Matt at Kleene, or Emily at Kleene, please do get in touch. And yeah, look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, guys. Cheers, folks.
Bye.